Dark Romanticism, a look into events in literature and the world from 1830 to 1860. Look into Dark Romanticism. Little overview. The literary movement of Dark Romanticism, also known as Gothicism, focuses on the dark side of life, reflecting intense struggles with the morality within one's own head, suggesting that sin is an inherent human trait. It focuses on death, the supernatural, tragedy, and the unknown in the form of our own mind or whatever lurks in the dark. It focuses on horror and terror and the human fallibility. This was a movement that was formed amid political chaos, multiple financial and natural disasters, mounting racial tensions in the US, mass expansion and industrialization, and the forming of groups of alternative thought such as the Transcendentalists. Some ongoing events. There was a cholera pandemic from 1827 to 1838, and another that lasted from the 1840s until 1863. Severe fiscal depression lasting from 1837 to 1845. This was brought on by the Panic of 1837. Financial crisis brought on by domestic and foreign trade and the differences that it caused. Employment went up, but so did prices. And also pessimism. The fully formed Transcendentalist movement was going on throughout the 40s. They believed in intuition. They relied on intuition and personal revelation to establish a relationship with God. They tended to look beyond the five senses to try to transcend this reality, become more than you are at the present time, and look to nature which you belong. The Second and Third Seminole Wars were Native American groups fighting for the land that they lost in the when they were moved from their homeland to make way for America's expansion. The Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848, the California Gold Rush from 1848 to 1855. This increased man's look within himself. There was obviously greed and industrial natures which conflicted with the natural goodness found within people. Bleeding Kansas. They were battles from 1854 to 1859 between pro-slavery and free state supporting settlers in Kansas Territory after the passing of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which negated the Missouri Compromise. People were led into the new Kansas Territory and given the option to vote whether they would be a free or slave state. It led to mass amounts of people moving to the area to try to sway the vote, and then obviously conflict resulting from that. So some presidential terms. Quite a few presidents in this short span of time. You had Andrew Jackson, beloved Andrew Jackson, who was a big proponent of the Native American removal. Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, who was the shortest presidency ever, for just a month. He was also the first president to die in office, so that spread some gloom. John Tyler from 1841 to 1845, and James K. Polk. We also had Zachary Taylor from March 4th, 1849 to July 9th of 1850, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan. Now let's get into the events. In 1830, on May 20th, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, which was basically their promise, hey, we'll give you unsettled land in these territories we don't really want. In return, you give us the land that's in our borders, no matter what kind of life you've set up there. Fair? Fair. It wasn't really fair. Here we have a painting by Eugene Delacroix. Liberty leading the people. This was done in France, but it kind of exhibits the fight for individualism and freedom that the American Revolution kind of helped instigate. So all the events you'll find are interwoven, and there's reason behind everything. Victor Hugo in 1831 published The Hunchback of Notre Dame. In 1831, also Nat Turner led a slave rebellion. They went from house to house, freeing slaves by killing their masters. They used knives and other blunt instruments in order not to be detected. And Nat Turner is quoted as saying he wanted to spread terror and alarm among whites. In 1832, the Great Wave off Kanagawa is completed. It's a famous painting. You see it in every earthbound Cotton On Starbucks around. In 1832, on April 6th, a band of Sauk's, Kickapoo, and Meskwaki Indians tried to reclaim the tribal land that they were displaced from. Most just wanted peace and their land alone, but things got violent and they were put down by a militia. They were led by Black Hawk, a Sauk Indian, which is why it's called the Black Hawk War. It only lasted a few months, as you can see, but still left an impact on America's views in regards to the Native American population. Paul de la Roche completed this painting, The Execution of Lady Jane Grey, and you'll see where the phrase art imitates life or life imitates art. This was an ongoing theme. You'll see paintings from Europe and America were beginning to grow darker, not only in their hues, but in the natural, in the element that they dealt with. 1834 to 1836. Anti-abolitionist riots broke out in New York City in July of 1834. They burned homes, businesses, and churches of abolitionist leaders and ransacked black neighborhoods. It lasted nearly a week and was finally put down by a militia. In that same year, inhabitants of Boston burned down a convent due to their belief that someone was being held up against their will. This helped spread anti-Catholic and ideals and increased tension between Protestant and Catholic relations in Boston. In 1835, the first permanent Madame Tussauds wax museum went up in London. This is interesting because we have one not far away in Grand Prairie, a knockoff. It's pretty fun. Do you believe it or not? Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote The Devil in Manuscript and Young Goodman Brown in this year. Also in 1835, you had the Great Fire of New York. Burned up to 700 buildings in 17 city blocks. People weren't able to put out the fires because they were just pulling from wells in the river. The river was frozen over at this point in time, and the strong gales spread the fire, but it led to greater water supply in New York City. So there's a good thing. In 1836, the hidden secrets of a nun's life in a convent exposed. was published, it was a propaganda. It's now been seen as propaganda. It was meant to spread distrust between Protestants and Catholics. So there's a lot of distrust going on, a lot of tension in everybody's lives. On September 8th of 1836, the foundation of Transcendental Club occurred in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Some notable members included Ralph Waldo Emerson, which we've read, Amos Bronson Alcott, the father of Louisa May Alcott. She wrote Little Women and its sequel Little Men, Henry David Thoreau, and Margaret Fuller. In 1836, October, Charles Darwin returned from South America aboard the HMS Beagle with biological data he would later use to develop his theory of evolution. So this kind of spurred an interest in exploration and what's out there. And Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote Nature in 1836 as well. So in 1837, we see the invention of Morse code. It opens up new possibilities in communication. Edgar Allan Poe published the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket and Ligeia in 1838. That same year, the people of the Cherokee Nation were forcibly relocated during the Trail of Tears. Cherokee were one of the few remaining to stay in the lands they had originally settled, but they were displaced. In November of 1839, culturally, Giuseppe Verdi's first opera, Alberto Conte di San Bonifacio, opened in Milan. I don't know if I said that right, but I listened to it, and if you like opera, it's Verdi, so there's that. In 1839, on January 9th, the French Academy of Sciences announced the daguerreotype. It's a photography process. It was developed by Louis Daguerre. It was used from the early 1840s to the late 1850s. It provided a lasting snapshot of people and was the first publicly available way, without having to have a portrait done. You can have a picture of your countenance on you. Edgar Allan Poe wrote The House of Usher and William Wilson in 1839. And the first state law permitting women to own property was passed in Jackson, Mississippi in 1839. So another good thing. Few and far in between, considering all that was going on. And The Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque by Edgar Allan Poe was published in 1840. J.M.W. Turner first displays his painting The Slave Ship in 1840, and you see again the paintings have a more morose tone to them. There was I believe, either yellow fever or cholera epidemic on board the ship, and they were disposing the bodies. That's what this painting is of. The United States versus the Amistad, a court case ruling in favor of a slave rebellion in 1841, happened where people were kidnapped in West Africa and shipped to Cuba. They escaped their shackles, and they killed the captain and the cook. Other crew members escaped in a lifeboat. They told them, the mutineers told two navigators to return them to Africa, but the crew tricked them and sailed north at night. Whenever they got here, they claimed a suit to have been forcibly kidnapped and sold as slaves. The district agreed and held that they be transported back to Africa. The Murders in the Rue Morgue first appears in Graham's Magazine in April 20th On April 20th of 1841, Edgar Allan Poe was actually an editor at that magazine. Maybe that's why he got published. Who's to say? Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote The Transcendentalist in 1842, further spreading the ideas of looking beyond. In 1843, Edgar Allan Poe publishes The Telltale Heart and The Black Cat. Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol to give you some sort of scope on where we are in time in 1843. The first electrical telegraph was sent by Samuel Morse from Baltimore, Maryland to Washington, D.C. on May 24th of that year. This and other advancements in technology made people uneasy, thinking that the times of the past of joy and love were past us and that we were moving toward a new industrial age, and it scared people. And you can see the reflection of that uneasiness in people's writings. Alexander Dumas wrote in 1844 The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers, another famous novel. In January 29, 1845, Edgar Allan Poe published The Raven for $10 whole. Rich man, I tell ya. John McStanley finished The Buffalo Hunt on the southwestern prairies. You can see that there. This was added more to show the relations with Native Americans. It was a heavy topic on a lot of people's minds. The Boston Anti-Slavery Society published Frederick Douglass's narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, in May of 1845. So again, this also brings racial tensions into the mix. It was already a hot topic on people's minds, and this only further cemented it. In 1846, January 3rd, Edgar Allan Poe published The Philosophy of Composition. Nitroglycerin was invented in this year. Sanyo Sobrero. This led to dynamite and a furthering of expansion and industrialization. Antoine Wiertz finished his painting in English, The Two Girls. And again, you see the darkness and the use of macabre figures in art. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre was published in 1847 of this, and then Emily, her sister, wrote and published Wuthering Heights. Also, The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx was published in London in February of 1840. In 1849, Edgar Allan Poe's poem Annabel Lee is published. Nathaniel Hawthorne writes The Scarlet Letter in 1850. And in 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act, lawfully allowing the recapture and return of runaway slaves, is passed by Congress on September 18th. At the Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio, Sojourner Truth first delivered her Ain't I a Woman speech in 1851. This is another example of racial tensions growing to a point where something must be said, and people were there to listen. On June 5th, 1851, in a continuation of that, Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel Uncle Tom's Cabin appeared as a serial in the National Era, a weekly abolitionist publication. And later in that year, Herman Melville's Moby Dick was first published as a book in a single volume. And Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote The House of Seven Gates. In 1852, the safety brake elevator is invented by Elisha Otis. This meant taller buildings, bigger buildings. John Everett Millay completes and displays Ophelia. In 1852, Nathaniel Hawthorne completes and publishes the Blithedale Romance. In May of 1853, a yellow fever outbreak kills over 7,000 in New Orleans. Herman Melville's short story, Bartleby the Scrivener, which we read, was published in 1853. The Inhumation, it's the premature burial. And this is another work by Antoine Wiertz. It's Belgian, but you can see the draw to the dark and supernatural in this as well. Walden was written by Henry David Thoreau in that year as well. Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, his book of poetry, is published in Brooklyn, New York in 1855 on July 4th. Herman Melville writes The Paradise of Bachelors and The Tartarus of Maids in 1855 and The Piazza Tales in 1856. Gustave Flaubert writes Madame Bovary. And in 1857, the Dred Scott versus Sanford, the Supreme Court rules that slaves cannot sue for freedom and citizenship is reserved for white members of society only. This even further increases racial tension and the drive toward civil war. Elizabeth Gaskell publishes The Life of Charlotte Bronte in 1857. In 1858, Our American Cousin by Tom Taylor is first performed in New York City. It was a comedy. It's a real laugh riot. You'd laugh your head off. This was the play that Abraham Lincoln was watching whenever he was assassinated, so it has relevance. Edward Manet completes his first major painting, The Absinthe Drinker, in 1859. He was criticized as having no talent. In 1859, John Brown led the raid on Harper's Ferry in Virginia, the armory there, in order to incite a slave rebellion. It did not go well. There are rumors that he asked Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass to attend. Harriet Tubman fell ill, so she was not able to, and Frederick Douglass said that he knew that it would fail, and he ended up being right. It was put down by a militia as well. The first part of Charles Dickens' Great Expectations makes its appearance in 1860. In 1860, Nathaniel Hawthorne also writes and publishes The Marble Faun. Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow first appears in 1860. And that same year, November 6th, Abraham Lincoln is elected as the 16th President of the United States, the first Republican to hold such office. South Carolina soon becomes the first state to secede from the Union in December of 1860. We have Emily Dickinson. She was born in 1830, right at the beginning of this movement. We have Samuel Langhorne Clemens, also known as Mark Twain, born on November 30th of 1835. Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula in 1847. Robert Louis Stevenson was born in 1850, right kind of smack dab in the middle. Booker T. Washington, the author and orator, was born on April 5th, 1856. L. Frank Baum, the author of the Oz books, was born in 1856, right at the tail end. And George Bernard Shaw, author of the play Pygmalion, 1856. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle of Sherlock Holmes fame was born on May 22nd, 1859. Anton Chekhov, the Russian playwright, was born in 1860. And J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan, the play, later turned to a book, in 1860. These are important because these children and people, as they grew up, were reading what was formed by and influenced by the movement of dark romanticism. Notable deaths are Emily Bronte. She was the one who wrote Wuthering Heights, the sister that wrote Wuthering Heights. She died in 1848. Edgar Allan Poe in 1849. Margaret Fuller died in 1850. Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein in 1819, I think. She died in 1851. Elizabeth's sister Charlotte, who wrote Jane Eyre, died at the age of 38. And Washington Irving died at the age of 76 on November 28, 1859. Thank you.